Hello and welcome to this lecture, and in this lecture we are going to learn about Python console or the Python command line. So we have already installed two softwares. So the very first thing which we have installed is actually Python, and the next thing which we have installed is nothing but this JetBrains PyCharm, which is nothing but an integrated development environment for Python. Now let me explain you the brief difference between the two. So when we will be writing big programs, then we will be using PyCharm, which is nothing but an IDE, which will help us to manage all the files together, and it will allow us to write the code in a much more better way. But it is also necessary to learn how the Python console actually works. So for this section at least, we are going to go with the Python console, and we will be writing code in the Python console itself. So in order to open up the Python console, what you need to do is that you need to go to the search window and you need to simply type in Python, and this thing which pops up is nothing but the Python console. So simply open it up, and you could also call this thing as the Python command line or the Python console, but I am going to call it console. So now here what you need to do is that right in front of these three greater than signs, you actually need to write in the code which we want to execute. So in this Python console, what you could do is that you could write a single line of code, but when you need to write some big programs, then in that case we are going to go with the PyCharm. So let's go ahead, and without wasting any time, let's write our very first program, which is nothing but to print hello world on the screen. So printing hello world in Python is comparatively easy than other languages. So for printing hello world, you simply type in print, have a opening bracket and a closing bracket, and in between these brackets within single quotes we could type in something which we want to display. So in this case, as we want to display hello world, I am going to simply type in hello world, and that's it. You don't need to provide any semicolon at the end or nothing like that. So simply hit enter, and as you could see, it printed out hello world. Now after this, we are going to learn pretty basic things in this section, and the reason for that is some of the things in Python are slightly different from other languages. So when we proceed to more complex sections, you might face some problem if you don't go through this section. So even if you know any other programming language like C, C++ or Java, and if you're thinking of skipping this part, then please don't do so, because this part is extremely crucial, because there are slight differences between Python and other languages. Okay, so we have successfully printed out hello world on the console, and the next thing which we are going to do is that we are going to perform some mathematical operations on this console. So for example, let's say you want to add in two numbers together. So let's say you want to add 200 and 300. So in Python, you could simply type in 200 plus 300, and when you hit enter, as you could see, you have the result. Now similar to addition operation, you could also perform subtraction. So if you type in 200 minus 300, as you could see, you get a negative result. Now you could also perform multiplication of things like 75 multiplied by 32, and you are going to have an answer. Now not only this, but you could also perform some complex mathematical operations like 5 multiplied by 6, and you could also specify in brackets some other operation like, let's say, 5 plus 89. And even if you type in a complex mathematical expression and if you hit enter, I guess I missed a multiplication sign here. So if you type in a mathematical expression or a complex expression and if you hit enter, as you could see, you are still going to have a result. Now these things might sound basic, but we need to go through them because they will be needed when we go for some complex sections. So the next thing which I want to mention is that there are actually two ways in Python by which you could divide numbers. So the simple way is like doing 500 divided by 100 by using a single slash. So if you type in a single slash, as you could see, you are going to get a float here. Now float is some value which has a decimal point. So in this case, as you could see, even if we didn't need the digits after the decimal point, still it printed out the result to be 5.0. Now if you were to eliminate the decimal point, what you could do is that you could simply type in 500, and instead of using a single slash, you could have simply used double slash here and type in 100, and let's see what is the result this time. So if you hit enter, as you could see, we get an integer value. So this time we don't have any decimal value or float value. Instead, we get the result as an integer value. Now the next thing which I want to mention is the divide by zero error. Now divide by zero error is there in almost each and every programming language. So for example, if you were to divide something by zero, you are going to get an error. So if you take any random number and if you try to divide this by zero, as you could see, you are going to get an error which says zero division error or division by zero. So that means you cannot divide any number by zero. So even if you have some mathematical expression like any number divided by something which is eventually going to give you a zero. So let's say this is going to be 99 minus 99. So automatically that comes out to be zero. So make sure that you don't have such expressions in your program, because that is going to give you a divide by zero error and your program is going to end then and there. So make sure that you check your code and check for the divide by zero error in order to avoid it. So after this, I also want to mention a thing about floats. So float is nothing but the data which is going to have a decimal point. So if we even multiply 6.0 multiplied by 3, so instead of getting the value as 18, we are going to get the value as 18.0. So if we hit enter, as you could see, now we have the value as 18.0. So the thing with float is that even if you use a float in any of the mathematical expression, your answer is going to be in the form of a float. That is, it is going to have a decimal point in it. So if you were to multiply simply 6 and 3, you will get a normal answer which is 18. But as you could see, if we multiply 6.0 with 3, you are going to get 18.0. And the same rule applies to addition as well. So if you type in 22.0 plus 15, you will get an answer as 37.0 instead of getting 37. So that's it for this lecture, and my main intention in this lecture was to get you guys familiar with the Python console or the Python command line and show you guys how you could write in a single line of code in Python console and execute it by just pressing enter. So we have learned about the Python console, we have learned how to perform some simple mathematical operations, and we will be learning more complex operations such as how to calculate exponent of a number and everything like that in the upcoming lectures. So that's it for this lecture, and I highly recommend you to go through the entire first section. I know it is going to sound silly and it is going to be a little bit boring, and like, I know this stuff, why am I actually learning this? But the thing is that if you go through the entire first section, you will find the other sections much more easy. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next class. Thank you. Hello and welcome to this lecture, and in this lecture we are going to learn how to calculate exponent of a particular number. Now if you know already what is exponent, then it is absolutely fine, but for the guys who don't know what exponent is nothing but a number raised to a certain number. So calculating the exponent of a number is nothing but raising that number to a certain power. So if you have something like 3 raised to 2, that means you multiply 3 by 3 twice. And if you have something like 2 raised to 6, then what you could do is that you could type in 2 into 2 into 2 into 2 6 times. So in that way we will get an exponent of a number. So in that way we could calculate the square, the cube of any number. So now let's go ahead and calculate 2 to the power 2. So if you want to do 2 raised to 2, so you could simply type in 2 and type in the star sign which stands for multiplication, but you type it in once again. So having the star sign 2 times means that we want to raise 2 to a certain number. So if you want to perform 2 raised to the power 2, you could simply type in 2 here, and if you hit enter, as you could see, you get 4 over here. And if we type in 2 to the power 3, as you could see, you will get an answer as 8. So 2 to the power 3 means 2 multiplied by 2 multiplied by 2. So in this way we could calculate exponent of any number in Python, and what you could do is that you could also use this exponent sign to calculate the square root of any number. So let's say if you want to calculate the square root of a number 49, so what you could do is that you could type in 49 raised to the power of, and here we are going to type in 1 by 2. So essentially, when you want to calculate the root of any number, you could simply go ahead and type in number raised to the power 1 by 2, which is nothing but 0.5. So if you execute this line, as you could see, we got the result as 7. So essentially the square root of 49 is 7, hence we got the answer as 7. Now let's go ahead and learn some other type of different mathematical operations. So we have already discussed, like for dividing any number, we simply type a number divided by another number. And as I earlier mentioned, we used to get a float value right over here. So in order to eliminate that float value, you could simply type in the double divided by sign, which is going to completely eliminate the float value, and we are going to get the integer. So if we again do 98 divided by 7, as you could see, we got the value as 14. So as you could see, we got the quotient here. Now let's learn how to calculate the remainder in a division. So for example, let's say you have 7 divided by 3. So 3 2s are 6 and 1 would be the remainder. But if you actually divide this number, as you could see, you will get 2.3, which is nothing but the quotient. Now in this case, to actually get the remainder, instead of having the divide by sign, you will have a sign which is called as the modulus. So if you type 7, and the sign for modulus is a percent sign, so if you type 7%3 and hit enter, as you could see, you will get a remainder right over here. Now this thing is specifically useful when you actually want to know if a particular number is odd or even. Now you could easily determine by the last digit that if a particular number is odd or even, but in Python what you could do is that if you have any random number and if you need to check if this number is odd or even, you could simply type in the number, and I guess this was a big one. So if you could simply type in a number, and what you could do is that you could use the mod sign and then type in 2. So if the answer is 0, that means the number is even, or let's take an odd number here. And if the answer comes out to be 1, that means the number is actually odd. So the same exact logic is used when we actually write in a program to determine if a particular number is odd or even. So one more thing which I would like to point out is that you could also use both the operators, that is the exponential operator as well as the modulus operator, with floating numbers as well. So for example, if you have some value as 782.67 modulus 43, so even then you are going to get an answer, and this applies to the exponential operator as well. So for example, if you have some number like 564.09 to the power of 2.3, as you could see, you will get an answer. So now before ending this lecture, what I am going to give you is that I am going to type in a simple mathematical expression and you actually need to guess an answer for it. So I'm quickly going to type an expression. So this is 7 mod of, in brackets, 5 divided by 2. So pause this video, take your time and find out the exact answer of this and note it down, and you could resume the video later on. So if we execute this, the answer comes out to be 1, and the logic behind this is that if you divide 5 by 2, this thing right here is nothing but the division operation, which is going to eliminate the floating numbers. So this is going to give you answer as 2, and if you calculate 7 mod 2, the remainder of dividing 7 by 2 comes out to be 1. So that's why we have an answer as 1. So that's it for this lecture, and I hope you guys understand how to calculate the exponent of a number, how to calculate a number raised to certain number, and also how to find out the remainder as well as quotient by using the modulus operator and the division operator. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next class. Thank you. Hello and welcome to this lecture, and in this lecture we are going to talk something about strings. Now if you recall, we have already typed in the program for printing out the hello world. So in that case, what we did is that we have simply typed out print, and in brackets inside single quotes we had something like hello world. So that was actually easy enough. So if you typed in this thing and if you hit enter, you got the result as hello world. But if you are using a console and you need to print out hello world in this, what you could simply do is that you could even eliminate the use of print, and you could simply mention this hello world inside single quotes. So let me just go ahead and type in hello world in single quotes, and let's see what is going to be the result in this case. So if you hit enter, as you could see, still you got hello world, and also you could express this in double quotes as well. So if in double quotes you type in hello world, as you could see, you still got the same result. Now the problem with this thing is that, let's say you have a sentence in which you want to use a quote, but that quote is going to be inside the sentence. So let's take a simple example. So let's say we want to type something like, he is a good guy. So in this line, if we specify this line which is he's a good guy in single quotes, and if you try to hit enter, as you could see, you are going to have an error over here. Now the reason for the error is that Python actually thinks that you have started the quote here, you have ended the quote here. That means that this thing is a single line, and he does not actually understand what you have written after it. So we actually need to have some way in which we could tell Python that this is not the Python single quote, this is actually a quote in our sentence. So for doing that, what we do is that we bring up the line here by pressing the upper arrow key. So if you have typed some line of code and if you want to bring it up again, you could press the upper arrow key, and right here, right before the single quote, we use something which is called as backslash. So if you have a look on your keyboard, this backslash is right above your enter key. So if you type in a backslash here, what this thing does is that it actually tells Python that this thing right here is a single quote, but it is not included in the syntax of Python. Instead, it is a single quote from our sentence. So if you do that and if you hit enter, as you could see, you are going to have the result as he is a good guy. Now one more thing which I would like to mention is that there is other alternative to this as well. So if you simply type in double quotes, and what you could do is that you could actually use single quotes and double quotes without having any problems. So if you type in he's a good guy over here and hit enter, as you could see, you are going to get a result as he's a good guy. And the same case applies to single quotes as well. So if you have some single quotes, and in here if you actually want to mention something in double quotes like he is let's say we want to specify the word good in quotations, and if we type in guy after it, and if you hit enter, as you could see, still it is going to have no issue. But if you are using double quotes for the syntax and double quotes inside your sentence too, then you are going to have a problem. So for example, if we type he is a, and again use double quotes like good guy, as you could see, you are going to have an error. So the same thing applies to this thing as well. So if you want to have the sentence in double quotes and have double quotes in it, you again need to use a backslash right before the double quotes. And if you execute this thing, it is not going to work. But if you specify backslash before each and every double quote like this, which I have done right here. So if you have this sentence right here, so what you need to do is that you need to go here, have a backslash right before the double quotes, and have a backslash right before the double quote ends. So what this thing does is that it tells Python that these quotes does not actually belong to the syntax, instead they belong to the sentence. So if you hit enter now, as you could see, you are going to have no error in the out. So that's it for this lecture, and I hope you guys learned a thing or two about strings. And in the next lecture, what we are going to learn is that we are going to learn how to accept the user input in Python. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next lecture. Thank you. Hello and welcome to this lecture, and in this lecture we are going to learn how to accept the user input in Python. So up till now we have already written a program to do some things, but we have not actually written some code to accept input from user, and in this lecture we are exactly going to learn that. And also we are going to learn about the new line, which is how to print a sentence in a new line in Python. So even before doing that, let's go ahead and learn how to actually accept input in Python. So in order to accept input in Python, what you could simply do is that you could type in input, which is nothing but a function which allows you to accept some number or some sentence or some string from the user. So after this, as this is a function, you need to have the opening and closing brackets, and in this brackets in single quotes you actually need to type in some text which gets displayed to the user. So let's say here you want to type something like please enter a value. So what this thing does is that it is actually going to ask the user for a particular value, and this text right here is actually going to get displayed to the user. So you could modify this text according to your need, but just for the sake of example I have taken this thing, and the input function is actually used to accept input from the user. So if you execute this thing, as you could see, it is asking you to enter a value. So I'm going to type in some value like some random number like 102 or let's say 103, and if I hit enter, as you could see, the value is displayed right here. So whatever value we enter, it is going to get displayed right over here. Now let me just enter the value again, and this time instead of putting in the integer value, let me put a string value. So let me just type in my name here, and when I hit enter, as you could see, I got the value as my name. Now what we actually need to do is that we actually need to take this value and store it into something which is called as a variable, but we will not be learning variables right now because we actually need to study variables in much more depth. So we will not be doing this in this tutorial, but we will learn that in the upcoming tutorial. Now after this, let me give you a brief overview of how to print a sentence on a new line in Python. So let's say we want to print in some sentence, so we type in print, and in quotations we type in something like hello Mike, and let's type in welcome to the club. So if you hit enter, as you could see, the entire sentence gets printed on a single line. Now what if you actually want to print these two things, that is hello Mike on one line and welcome to the club on the other line? So in that case, what you could do is that you could use something which is called as a /n, which stands for a new line. So you simply need to use a backslash and then type in n. So what this thing actually does is that it prints out this thing on the first line, then it is going to jump onto a new line, and then it is going to print out the second line. So if we execute this code, as you could see, hello Mike is on the first line, welcome to the club is on the second line, and we have this space right here because we left this space right here. So if we go back and remove this space and execute the code again, as you could see, now we have these two things on separate lines. Now you could also print as many number of lines as you want. So let's say you want one more line right here, so you could simply give a /n right after the existing line, and you could type in something new like we are glad to have you here. So if you hit enter, as you could see, this time we have everything on a new line, that is hello Mike on the first line, welcome to the club on the second line, and finally we are glad to have you here on the third line. So that is how you could use the /n to basically print out multiple things on separate lines. So that's it for this lecture, and I hope you guys understood two things from this lecture. So the very first thing is how to accept the input from the user, and remember, we have only learned how to accept the input, but we have not actually learned how to save the input, and that thing is quite simple. It won't take much time, but it was just to make you guys understand the significance of the input function and how input function can be used to actually grab the value from the user. And also we have learned about the new line. So if you already learned some languages like C, C++, you must already be knowing this thing, but this was for the guys who were unaware of this. So that's it for this lecture, and I'll see you guys in the next lecture. Thank you. Hello and welcome to this lecture, and in this lecture we are going to learn something which is called as string operations. So we have already learned about strings, but still I would like to give you a brief overview of strings. So anything in Python which is expressed in single quotes or double quotes like this is going to be a string. So if you type in hello, so this thing right here is going to be a string. Now even if you have some number like 5, but if you have that number in single quotes or double quotes, that means you have a string and you don't have a number. So this thing right here, which is 5, is not an integer. Instead, it is actually a string in Python. So now let's learn one of the basic operations in Python, which is called as concatenation. So concatenation is nothing but it is something which is called as joining of two strings. So let's say if you want to join two strings, then you could use the concatenation operation. So let's say you have something which is called as hello, and let's say you want to join this thing with a new string which is called as world. So let's type in world here. So as you could see, we have now two strings, and in order to join these two strings, what we do is that we use a plus sign, which is nothing but the concatenation operator, which is going to join the two strings together. So if you type in hello plus world, that is going to give you a single string which says hello world. Now what if we actually specify numbers in double quotes? So for example, if you specify 5 plus 5, the answer to this is not going to be 10, instead it is going to be 55. If you don't believe me, let me just press enter, and as you could see, the answer is actually 55, because this plus sign right here is not actually an addition operation. Instead, it is a concatenation operation to join two strings. But if you were to type in 5 plus 5, you will get an answer as 10. But as we have mentioned 5 in single quotes or double quotes, that means 5 is not an integer in this case. Instead, it is a string. So if you have some string, if you add two strings, you are going to get the answer as the concatenation of two strings. That is nothing but joining two strings together. And also you could join multiple strings together. So let's say if you have something like hello, I am and happy. So as you could see, what I did here is that I took multiple strings together and I simply added them up, or I simply performed the concatenation operation by including a plus sign in between each of these strings. So as you could see, now we have the result as hello, I am happy. So that was all about the concatenation operation. Now let's learn if we could concatenate an integer and a string value. So as I mentioned, a string value is represented in double quotes or single quotes. So let's say we type in hello, and let's say you want to add hello, which is a string value, with 5, which is an integer value. So if you hit enter, as you could see, we have an error over there. But if we mention 5 as a string in double quotes and hit enter, as you could see, we have the result as hello 5. So you could only perform concatenation operation on two strings. So you need to have multiple strings, only then you could use the plus sign to concatenate them. Now let's learn if we could actually multiply a string with an integer. So what if we actually have a string which is called as, let's say, some person's name, which is Rob. So if we have Rob and if we multiply Rob by 3, let's see what actually happens. So as you could see, when we multiply a string by any number, the string actually gets repeated by the number which we have specified. So if we type in Rob and if we multiply it by 10, as you could see, we have Rob 10 times right over here. So this is what happens if you try to multiply a string with an integer value. But what if we actually multiply a string with another string? So let's see what happens in this case. So if we have Rob, and if we convert this string, and if we convert this 10 to a string by having double quotes here, and if we hit enter, as you could see, this time we actually have an error. And the reason for that is we cannot multiply a string with a string. So the only thing which you could do is that you could add two strings. You could multiply a string with an integer, but you could not add a string with an integer, or you cannot multiply a string with a string. So those were some basic string operations, and we will be needing these string operations in the upcoming lecture where we will be solving some complex programming challenges. So make sure that you understand this stuff in a better way so that this proves to be helpful for you in the upcoming lectures, in the upcoming sections. So that's it for this lecture, and I hope you guys understood the concatenation string operation. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next lecture. Thank you. Hello and welcome to this lecture, and in this lecture we are going to learn something about variables. So if you remember from school, you had this subject which was called as algebra, and in this subject we used to have some mathematical expressions or algebraic expressions like a plus b equals c or x plus y equals 70 or something like that. So if you recall from that class, you might know that x, y, a, b, c and all the other things were actually called as variables. So variables in Python are exactly similar to the variables in algebra. So essentially a variable is nothing but something which allows us to store a certain value. So in the previous lectures we have learned about a lot of things, but variables are actually one of the most important things in any programming languages, not only in Python, because every program is nothing but something which actually takes the data, processes it, and finally puts out a result by manipulating that data or those numbers. So essentially what we need to do is that we need to have something which allows us to capture the data or store the data, and variables are the things which allows us to do exactly the same thing, which is to save the data. So without wasting any time, let's go ahead and learn what are variables. So let's make a simple variable. So variables could have any name. So let's name this variable as a, and let's say you want to save a value like 10 into this variable a. So what you need to do is that you need to use the equal to sign, and this equal to sign in Python is known as the assignment operator. So the main function of this assignment operator is to assign a value to the variable which is expressed to the left of it. So on the left hand side we have a. So in this case we want to assign a value of 10 to a. So we type a equals 10, and when we do that, the value of 10 is going to get stored in a. And if you don't believe me, then let's go ahead and print out the value of the variable. So if we type in print, and in the brackets if we specify a and hit enter, as you could see the value gets printed out to be 10. Now let's take another variable b and let's assign a value of 20 to it. So if we assign a value of 20 to variable b, this means the value of 20 gets stored in the variable b. So again, if we want to check if the value is actually stored, you could simply print out the contents of b. So if we hit enter, as you could see we got the result as 20. Now what you could do is that you could have a third variable c, and you could simply say that c equals a plus b. So what this is going to do is that it is going to take a, which is 10, then it is going to take b, which is 20, it is going to add them up as a plus b, which is going to be 30, and finally the value 30 gets stored in the variable c. So if we execute this thing, now the value 30 gets stored in c. So if you want to check it by yourself, you could simply type in print, and you could pass in a value of c to print. And if we actually print out the value, as you could see, you have the value of 30 within C. But one more interesting thing which I would like to tell you is that if you actually close this Python console or the Python command line, and if we again go here and open this thing up, and now if you type in print C, as you could see, you are not going to have any value in there. That is because when you actually close this program, the value stored in all the variables automatically gets deleted. So what you need to do is that you need to assign those values again. So I just wanted to clarify this thing, because what we are going to do from a few tutorials from this is that instead of using this boring Python console, we are actually going to work with PyCharm, which is an IDE. So stay tuned for that, and bear with me for the next 2 to 3 lectures as we will be using this Python console. And also one more thing which I would like to mention about variables is that you can not only store numbers into variables, but you could also store names. So you could simply type in a equals and you could type in your name here. So I'm going to type in my name, and if you hit enter, the name actually gets stored into the variable a. But the only thing which you need to remember is that when you actually want to store a value of name into a particular variable, or if you want to store a string into a variable, you always mention the string in either single quotes or double quotes. So in this case, I have mentioned my name in quotes, and what this thing does is that it tells Python that we actually want to store a string into a variable a. So if we again print out the value of a, as you could see, I'm going to get my name and you're going to get yours, because you actually stored your name into the variable a. Now, what if you actually want to remove a particular variable's data? So let's say if you want to remove what is stored in this variable a. So in that case, what you could do is that you could go ahead and delete it by using the delete statement. So you could simply type in del, give a space, and then specify from which particular variable you want to delete the data. So in this case, as we have a single variable a, so simply type in a and hit enter, and the data which was stored in the variable a will now be completely removed. So if you want to make sure that the data is removed, you could type in print, and now this time if you pass the value of variable a, as you could see, it says that name a is not defined. That is because we have deleted the value which was stored in a. So that's it for this lecture, and I hope you guys understood what are variables and how variables can be used to store some data, which could be the numbers or strings or sentences. So you could actually store sentences in variables as well in the form of a string. So that's it for this lecture, and in the next lecture we are going to learn something about the in place operators. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Thank you. Hello and welcome to this lecture, and in this lecture we are going to learn something about the in-place operators. So instead of just me explaining it from scratch, let's go ahead and take a simple example. So let's say we have some variable which is called as age, and let's say this variable is used to save the value of age. So let's say the age of a person is, let's say, 39. So if you hit enter, this means that the value of 39 gets stored into age. Now, on each and every birthday, what we need to do is that we actually need to upgrade, or we need to increment the age of this person by a value of 1. Now, what you need to do to increase the value of age is that you simply need to type in age plus 1. So what this thing is going to do is that it is going to take the value of age, which is 39, and it is going to add a 1 into it. So we will get the result as 40, but still the value of age is going to remain as 39. So what we need to do here is that we need to save this entire thing again back into the age value or the age variable. So you need to type in age equals age plus 1. And what this thing is going to do is that it is going to take the age, which is 39, it is going to add 1 to it so that it becomes 40, and finally the age value gets stored into the variable age. So if we hit enter, now the value 40 is stored in the variable age. So if you want to confirm it, you could simply type in print age, and as you could see, now the age value is 40. Now this line of code right here is somewhat unacceptable in many programming languages, because it is not a standard way of doing so, wherein you have to use the variable name twice in a single line just to add a single 1 to it. So in order to tackle this problem, they have introduced something which is called as in-place operators. So instead of writing this line as age equals age plus 1, what you could do is that you could type in age, then give a plus sign, then give a equal sign, and then you specify the value which you want to add into the age. So right now the age is 40, and let's say on the next birthday his age is going to be 41. So you simply need to add a value of 1. So what this line of code is going to do is that it is going to take the current age value and it is going to add a number which is specified over here. So it is going to take the current age value as 40, and it is going to add a 1 to it, and it is going to store the result back into the variable age. So that means now we have 41 stored into the variable age. So if you execute this query and simply print out the value stored in age. As you could see, now the value of age is going to be 41. Now let's say you want to increase the value of age by 4 and not by 1. So in that case, what you could do is that you could type in age plus equals, and now instead of having 1 here, you could simply type in 4. And what this is going to do is that it is going to take the current age value and it is going to add a 4 to it. So if you hit enter and again type in print age, as you could see, now we have 45 stored in the variable age. Now this in place operator not only applies to addition, but it also applies to subtraction, multiplication as well. So if you type in age minus equals 4, that means it is going to subtract the value of 4 from age. So now if we subtract 4 from 45, that is going to be 41. So if we again try to check the value of age, as you could see, now we have the age value as 41. Now you could also use this thing as a multiplication operation. So if you type in age, and let's say if you want to multiply the age by 2, so you could type in age multiplied by 2 or age multiplied by equal to 2. So what this is going to do is that it is going to take the value of age multiplied by 2 and again store back the result into the variable age. So again, if you print out the value stored in the age variable, as you could see, 41 multiplied by 2 is 82. Now one more interesting thing about this is that you could also perform this on a string variable. So let's say we have some string variable as b. So if we type b equals, and let's say this consists of hello, and now let's say that you want to add world to the string variable b. So what you could do is that you could type b plus equals, and in quotations you could type in world. And now if you were to print out the value which is stored in b, so as you could see, you will find hello world stored into the variable b. So that is basically what an in place operator is. So in place operator is nothing but this operator which basically eliminates the use of this line of code right here. And it is actually logically correct to write this line, but in most of the programming languages we have the in place operators wherein you could add a number to a particular variable without specifying the variable twice like this. So this thing right here is logically correct, but it is not a good practice to use this. Instead, it is advisable to use in place operators. So make sure that you always use in place operators rather than writing a line of code something like this. So that's it for this lecture, and this was actually the last lecture in this Python console. So from the next lecture onwards, we will be using PyCharm, which is a JetBrains IDE for Python, and it is going to be much more fun coding in PyCharm as compared to this boring black and white console. So thank you very much for watching this lecture, and I'll see you guys in the next lecture. And in the next lecture we will start with PyCharm. I'm going to explain you how to create a Python project in PyCharm and how to create a Python file in which you could write multiple lines of code in Python. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next lecture. Thank you. Hello and welcome to this lecture, and from this lecture onwards we will be using PyCharm. So PyCharm is the IDE which we have already installed. So if you have a desktop icon of PyCharm on your desktop, you could simply open this thing up. So if you want to open up PyCharm, simply go to the search window and type in PyCharm, and the PyCharm is going to pop up, and you simply need to click this and PyCharm is going to open up for you. So once this thing opens up, you might not be having these files on the left hand side, because these are my own projects which I have created as demo. And what you need to do here is that you need to create a new project. So simply click on this thing which says create a new project, and here what you need to do is that you actually need to create a project. So you could specify a location manually here, but I am going to leave it as default one, and make sure that you have the interpreter selected. Now simply click on create, and it is going to create a brand new project for us. So As you could see, this untitled 4 right here is nothing but our project. And what a project is essentially it is a folder which is going to contain all our Python files. So as we will be moving along the duration of this course, we are going to have multiple files, and what this PyCharm IDE does is that it allows you to maintain these files so that you could easily access them and edit them. So right now we only have a Python folder and we don't have any file in it. So in order to make a new Python file, you simply right click over here, go to new and select the Python file. And here let's name our Python file as demo, and make sure you select the Python file over here, then click OK. And as you could see, now we are into our file which is demo.py. Now, even before writing any code here, I would like to point out a thing that you could also change the theme of your current IDE to something else. So for example, if you have downloaded PyCharm for the very first time, then you might be having a white theme, but in my case, I have a darker theme. So if you want to change your theme, you could simply go to File, go to Settings, go to Editor, Colors and Fonts. And in colors and fonts, you could go here, and in this scheme you could select the theme which is called as Darkula. Now I'm actually using Darkula copy because I have modified it a little bit. So once you select the Darkula theme, you could simply go here and click OK, and you will also have a darker theme like me. But if you prefer a white theme, then even that is okay. It does not matter. It is just a matter of personal choice, but I just wanted to explain you that. Now let's go ahead and let's learn how to actually write in a program in PyCharm and how to actually execute it. So for example purpose, let's write a simple hello world program. So I'm going to simply type in print, and in quotations I am going to type in hello world. So once your program is done, what you could simply do is that you could go over here and click on save all. So save all is essentially going to save all the files in your folder, but currently as we only have one file, that means it is going to save a single file. So if you click save all, that means your program is saved. Now you could also use Ctrl S to save your program, and once the program is saved, you could simply right click anywhere over here, and here you have an option to run your program. So if you simply click this thing right here, as you could see right here, you will get output of your program. So as you could see, we got the output as hello world. So that's how you basically write in some Python program in PyCharm, which is an IDE. So that's it for this lecture, and the main purpose of this lecture was to get you familiar with the PyCharm IDE and to tell you guys how to write in a Python code in PyCharm, how to set up your project, how to create a Python file, and how to execute the code which you have written in the Python file. So that's it for this lecture, and I'll see you guys in the next lecture. Thank you. Hello and welcome to the very first coding challenge in Python, and for this coding challenge we will be building a simple interest calculator in Python. So for this coding challenge we are going to write our code. So what I have done here is that I have opened up a new project, and in that project I have a file which is called as demo.py. So right now the demo.py file is empty, and here we actually need to write in the code to calculate simple interest depending upon three factors, that is the principal, the number of years, and the rate of interest. So here what we will be doing is that we will be accepting the principal amount, the number of years, and the rate of interest from the user, and depending upon those values we are going to calculate the simple interest. So without wasting any time, let's directly go ahead and let's jump into the coding challenge. So the very first thing which we need to do is that we need to accept input from the user. So first let's go ahead and accept the principal amount. So in order to accept any value, we type in input, and here inside input we specify that we actually want to make user to specify the principal value. So we type enter value for P. So P actually stands for principal, and once we have accepted this value, what we need to do is that we need to store this value into some variable. So in order to do that, what we are going to do is that we are going to save this value in P. So we type P equals input enter value for p. So what this is essentially going to do is that it is going to take the text which is written inside these quotations and it is going to display this text to the user. And when the user actually enters the value for p, that value actually gets stored in this variable which is called as p. Now in Python, you actually don't need to declare the data type of a variable. So that is one advantage in Python, that you don't need to actually define the data type of any variable. So once we have the value for p, let's go ahead and also save the value of n, which is number of years, and r, which is rate of interest. So what I'm going to do here is, to save time, I am basically going to copy this code and I'm going to paste it twice here, and let's replace this p by n, which is number of years, and this p by n as well, and finally this by r and this p by r. So right now we have accepted the principal, the number of years, and the rate of interest. Now one more thing which we need to do here is that these values which we have accepted here are in the terms of strings. That means if you enter a value for p as, let's say, $1,000, then that $1,000 value is actually present in the form of a string. And you need some way to convert that string value into numerical value or an integer value. And the reason for that is we actually want to perform some mathematical operations on the p, n, and r. So we need to make sure that even before performing mathematical operations, we actually need to convert these values, that is the string values, into integer. So let's go ahead and do that one at a time. So let's first convert p into integer. So whenever you want to convert any string into integer, you simply type in int, and in brackets you specify what do you actually want to convert into an integer. So here in this case we want to convert p into integer. So by writing this line of code, p is successfully converted into integer. Now once it is done, we actually need to save this value, which is the new value of p, into the actual variable p. So we simply type p equals and then the converted value. And also you will see wave-like things beneath the equal to sign. That is because we have not left space over here, and it is actually recommended by Python to use this kind of syntax because it makes the code look much more beautiful, and more importantly, it makes the code readable. So once you have converted the value for p, let's do the same thing for n. So we type n equals integer, and let's pass in the value of n, and finally do the same thing for r. So we type r equals integer in brackets r. So once we have these three values converted into integers, now is the time to calculate the simple interest. So the formula for calculating simple interest is equal to principal into number of years into rate of interest divided by 100. So we simply type in SI. Let's say SI is a variable to store the value of simple interest. So we type SI equals in brackets P multiplied by N multiplied by R. And finally divide the entire bracket by 100. So now we have the value of simple interest stored in SI. So now what we are going to do here is that once we have the simple interest value, we need to simply print out the value. So in order to print out the value for simple interest, we type in print and then simply pass in the value as SI. So that's it, and we actually have the value of simple interest calculated. So if we go ahead and save the code, and if we actually run this code by simply right clicking over here and click on this run option, as you could see, it is asking us to enter the value of P. So let's say the principal amount is $1,000, and let's say the number of years is 1, and let's say the value for rate of interest is 10. So if we enter all these three values and hit enter, as you could see, we get the result as the value for simple interest is 100, and that is actually correct. So what you could do is that you could go ahead and run this code again, and you could check for multiple values if your code is correct. So let's go through the code once again, what we have done over here. So the very first thing which we have done here is that we have accepted the values for principal, the number of years and the rate of interest. Now, as these accepted values are in the term of strings, so we actually need to convert those string values into integer values. Hence, we have performed the conversion right over here. And once we have performed the conversion, we could go ahead and proceed with the mathematical operation, which is to calculate the simple interest. So in this single line of code right here, we have calculated the simple interest, and finally we have printed out the result which we have calculated. So that's it for this coding challenge, and I hope you guys enjoyed this coding challenge, and I hope you were able to perform this coding challenge on your own. But if not, even then it's okay, because as you are a beginner or as you have just started out learning Python, it might be a little bit difficult, but I assure you that Python is much more easier as compared to other complex programming languages. So that's it for this coding challenge, and I'll see you guys in the next lecture. Thank you.